Hi guys, this is Sam and welcome to Logic, where I help advanced English learners and teachers improve their English by analysing its mathematical and logical patterns. Before we start, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below and to hit the notification bell so you can be notified of all my new videos coming out every Tuesday. Today, we're going to study 4 grammar structures that are often used incorrectly, and we'll do that with these 4 sentences. I watch TV for 2 hours. I have watched TV for 2 hours. I have been watching TV for 2 hours. I watched TV for 2 hours. These are all grammatically correct, but they give us completely different meanings as to when and how these actions happened. The main question I want you to answer is, in which sentence or sentences am I watching TV now? And as a little experiment, before you listen to my explanation, I would like you to pause the video, come up with your own explanation, and then see if it matches mine. We will get to the exact meaning of these sentences by analysing the concepts that these 4 tenses express. And if you want a more detailed explanation of all these concepts, feel free to check my English grammar terminology video over here. And now, let's get started. Tense tells us when an action happens. It can be present, past, future. Aspect tells us how this action happens and how it extends over time. It basically describes the tense. We have 4 main aspects in English: simple, continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous. The simple aspect conveys the idea of completion, and it refers to general, unchanging actions that are always true, routines, repeated actions, and single completed actions. In the sentence, I watch TV for 2 hours, we have the simple present, which refers to actions that are always true in the past, present, and future. Water boils at 100 degrees is true yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We also use the simple present for repeated actions, routines, and habits. I play tennis 3 times a week means that every week I have the habit of playing tennis 3 times. We can therefore conclude that I watch TV for 2 hours refers to a routine, something that I do regularly, every day, every Thursday, every weekend, which means that I am not watching TV right now. Or, if you are physically watching TV right now and you say the sentence, I watch TV for 2 hours, the concept that you are highlighting is not that you are watching TV right now. You're just telling me that you have this habit. It's just a coincidence that you're actually watching TV right now. I watched TV for 2 hours contains the simple past, and the same concepts of the simple aspect apply here. We use the simple past for a repeated action in the past. Last year I played tennis 3 times a week means that last year I had the habit of playing tennis 3 times every week. With this meaning of past habit, we can also use used to and would. The simple past also refers to a single completed action in the past. Yesterday I went to the cinema. We can therefore infer that I watched TV for 2 hours can describe a single action in the past. Yesterday, I watched TV for 2 hours. Or a past habit. Last year, I watched TV for 2 hours every day because I had a lot of free time. And that means that I am not watching TV right now. Or, if I am physically watching TV right now and I say, I watched TV for 2 hours, it doesn't mean that I want to give the idea that I am watching it now. I'm just talking about a past habit or a past single action. It's just a coincidence that I'm actually watching TV right now as I'm saying it. It's now time to look at I have watched TV for 2 hours and I have been watching TV for 2 hours. But before we do that, I want to take a step back and carefully study the meaning and the concepts expressed by these 2 tenses. We will start from I have watched TV for 2 hours, which is the present perfect simple, but we will study completely different sentences for the time being. The perfect aspect, created with some form of have and past participle, describes an action happening before the time of the tense, creating a connection between them, and often with a result still existing in the tense. Specifically, the perfect simple aspect refers to a completed action happening before the time of the tense. The present perfect simple describes a completed action in the recent past with a result in the present, and it's very important to understand that the time is not specified, so I understand that it happened at some point in the past, but I don't know exactly when. If I say I have eaten an apple, this means that the apple doesn't exist anymore. The action is completed and it's not happening right now. And the result in the present might be that right now I'm not hungry because I'm still full from the apple. Please don't forget that although we call it present perfect, it doesn't happen in the present. Perfect means that this action happens before the tense, which is the present. So if it happened before the present, it's in the past. If I say I've broken my leg, it means that I broke it at some point in the recent past and my leg is still broken right now. The perfect continuous aspect refers to an ongoing action, continuous, happening before perfect, the time, tense that we're talking about, creating a relationship between the two. In the sentence, I'm tired because I have been running, which is present perfect continuous, the concepts that I'm trying to convey can be two. One can be that the action of running was ongoing until right now, so I've literally just stopped, and I can still feel the result of it because I'm tired. Or it actually means that the action is still happening, it's still going on, but I want to highlight the fact that it hasn't just started right now, but it's been ongoing for a while. We often use the perfect continuous aspect with expressions such as all day, lately, this week, because they deliver the meaning of an action that has been ongoing for a while. I've been working all day means that my action of working started at the beginning of the day and it has been ongoing all the way up to now. And usually it also means that I am still working right at this moment. So, we now know that both the perfect simple and perfect continuous aspect refer to actions happening before the time of the tense, creating a connection between them with often a result in the tense. But what is the difference between them? The perfect simple aspect refers to a completed action, whereas the perfect continuous aspect refers to an ongoing action. I've eaten an apple means that I am not eating the apple right now. I did it earlier and the apple is gone. I've been eating a lot lately means that my action of eating a lot started at some point in the recent past and it's still happening right now. It's ongoing. But this doesn't really help us understand the difference between I have watched TV for 2 hours and I have been watching TV for 2 hours. And that is because this is a very specific and special grammar construction called duration form. A duration form which is created with the present perfect simple or continuous plus the prepositions for and since describe actions that started in the past and are still happening. This is very important to remember. They started in the past and they are still happening right now. Which means that I have watched TV for 2 hours and I have been watching TV for 2 hours mean exactly the same thing, which is that I started watching TV 2 hours ago and I'm still watching it right now. It's very important to understand that this is the only way that we have in English to express this idea. And since this is by far the most mistaken grammar construction, if you do any kind of English language exam, you will be tested on this constantly. And let's remember that this is a very special case, it's an exception. Usually, as we saw before, the present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous describe completely different concepts, but in this case, they don't. We use for to convey the duration of the action. I've been watching TV for 2 hours. We use since to talk about a specific point in time. I've been watching TV since 3 p.m. We say, I've been watching TV since you left, because the verb left gives us a very clear and exact idea of when our action of watching started. And in some expressions, we can remove the preposition for. I've known her my whole life. I've been working all week, all day. So, we've said that I have watched TV for 2 hours and I have been watching TV for 2 hours mean exactly the same thing. Some books will tell you that the present perfect continuous, I have been watching, gives you the very specific idea of uninterrupted continuity, meaning that if I say I've been watching TV for 2 hours, it means that I've never left the sofa. Whereas if I say I have watched TV for 2 hours, it could imply that at some point between 2 hours ago and now, I quickly went to the toilet, for example. But when we speak English, we don't really think about this difference. So they basically literally mean exactly the same thing, and they are both correct in English exams. But we do have preferences. As you may have noticed, we like saying ing as much as we can in English, so we definitely prefer the present perfect continuous in affirmative sentences. I've been watching TV for 2 hours, it's been raining for 3 hours. Saying I've watched TV for 2 hours and it's rained for 3 hours is grammatically correct, but a native speaker would never really say it. It would never come out of my mouth as a sentence. On the other hand, we use the present perfect simple to talk about negatives. I wouldn't really say I haven't been playing tennis for 2 years. I would only say I haven't played tennis for 2 years. And we must use the present perfect simple with stative verbs, which are verbs that don't have the continuous form because they refer to emotions and states. I can't say I've been knowing her, or I've been being ill, or I've been liking chocolate. We must only use the present perfect simple. If you're watching TV now and I want to know how long this action has been going on for, the question is, how long have you watched, or have you been watching TV for, where for is optional. And once again, we tend to prefer the present perfect continuous if we can use it. How long have you been living here? How long have you been waiting? To which you can reply for 3 hours or since 3 p.m. Let's now have a recap of our 4 sentences. I watch TV for 2 hours is a routine, a repeated action, meaning that right now I am not watching TV. I have watched TV for 2 hours and I have been watching TV for 2 hours are a special construction that means that in both cases I started watching TV 2 hours ago and I am still watching it right now. I watched TV for 2 hours is a past completed action. As I said before, this is the most complicated grammar structure for foreigners to get right, because in their languages they express the concept of an action that started in the past and that is still happening in a different way. In all the languages that I personally speak, for example, you would use the simple present. So I watch TV for 2 hours, but in English we now know that it means something completely different. Other common mistakes are I am watching TV for 2 hours and I was watching TV for 2 hours, which unfortunately don't exist in English. We will now look at very common mistakes and we'll try to understand why they're wrong. If I want to deliver the concept that someone moved to London 2 years ago and they are still here now, I have to say I've been living in London for 2 years or I've lived in London for 2 years. I am living in London for 2 years unfortunately doesn't exist. And I lived in London for 2 years does exist, but it gives a completely different meaning. It means that this is a past action, meaning that right now you are not in London. But as we said before, you are indeed in London, so this sentence doesn't apply. I live in London for 2 years is wrong because it expresses a routine. And specifically with the verb live, this sentence is extremely uncommon because the concept that it gives is that you have the habit of living in London for 2 years repeatedly. So the only context in which it would work is if you say, I live in London for 2 years every 5 years, meaning that you have the habit of living in London for 2 years, then you leave London for 5 years, then you come back to London for 2 years, and then you leave again for 5 years, and you keep repeating this. So as you can see, it's not very common. but it is technically possible. And be very careful with the preposition. A lot of other languages would construct this sentence with the preposition from, but in English this doesn't actually exist. It's a big mistake in an English exam. If you're in London now and I want to know how long this action has been going on for, I can only ask you how long have you lived in London for, or how long have you been living in London for, where for is once again optional. How long are you living in London doesn't exist, and how long did you live in London is grammatically correct, but once again it refers to an action in the past. So an answer to this question would be, I lived in London for 2 years between 2018 and 2020. How long do you live in London refers once again to a routine, which is a very uncommon thing to ask, especially with this verb. If I ask you how long have you been in London, it means that I can see that you are in London now, and I want to know when in the past this action started. So you could reply, since Monday, because since Monday tells me that this action started last Monday. A lot of non-native speakers, however, get confused and reply until Monday, but until Monday refers to the future, so you are telling me when your action will end. So you are replying with a future concept to a question about the past. So in this case, it's incorrect. But we can use how long to ask about the future. So when in the future your action that is happening now will end. And in this specific case, I would say, how long will you live, or how long will you be living in London for? And if you reply for 5 years, I understand that your action of living in London that is happening now will finish in 5 years. The interesting thing is that when we talk about the future, we actually can use the present continuous, but not with all verbs. Saying, how long are you living in London, simply just doesn't exist because it doesn't work with the verb to live. But a very common thing to ask is, how long are you staying in London? Because the verb to stay gives me the idea of a short temporary action. So you might be a tourist and you are staying here for the next 3 days. How long will you stay, or will you be staying in London are also possible, but are you staying is definitely the most used one, especially when it's obvious that the stay is very short, especially if you're a tourist. Pay close attention to how long are you in London for 3 days, meaning that I am in London now and I will leave in 3 days. So I'm asking you about the future. How long have you been in London? For 3 days means that you are in London now, and the action of being in London started 3 days ago, but there is no information about the future, about when it will end. The last thing we need to talk about before you go is the expression since when, which exists, but it's not a real question. It only expresses shock, surprise, and anger. If I genuinely want to know how long your action of living in London has been going on for, I can only say, how long have you been living in London for? Or how long have you lived in London for? I can't say, since when have you been living in London? But if you tell me, you must wash the dishes today, I can say, since when do you tell me what to do? That means that I am shocked and surprised by what you've just said, and I'm telling you that I don't take orders from you. If you say, I've seen Tom 3 times this week, and I say, since when do you go out with Tom? It means that I am really shocked because I didn't know that you were going out with Tom. And if you say, I'm your new boss now, and I reply, since when? It means that I am very shocked, surprised, and possibly angry about it. Let's not forget that this is an informal spoken reaction. Don't use it in an English exam because it will be considered a mistake. As you can see, the tense after since when often varies, usually based on the verb. We prefer the simple present with verbs like go and be that refer to repeated actions. But conceptually, we can't use it with verbs like start because the idea of starting something is quick, immediate. It only lasts 1 second. And usually we use it in the simple past. And that's it for today. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe to my channel down below. And do let me know if you have any questions or observations about the lesson, and please do tell me if you got the differences between these full sentences right. And I will see you with my next video next Tuesday.